translation that was circulated. The passage is, at the root of creation there is great Pathos. And then if you skip a little bit, he says, while itself remaining indeterminate or undetermined, mugente, as Pathos, it contains within itself an unbearable demand for determination. Unquote. Imagination is said to create form in images or forms through the synthesis of Pathos and Logos. What does Miki mean by this? In the above passage, Miki, referring to Schelling, tells us that at the root of creation there is a great Pathos. The Pathos is a hunger for being or essence. Der Hunger nach Wesen. He's referring to Schelling. The formless Pathos thus takes on form through Logos. If we look at the original Greek senses of these terms, which Miki may or may not have been aware of, Pathos means incident or accident, or what one suffers or experiences, and Logos means the word or that by which an inward thought is expressed. The verb form related to Pathos, paskein, means to suffer, be affected, receive an impression, while the verb form for Logos, legein, means to gather, pick out, reckon up, count, and so on. Heidegger made much of this sense of gathering for legein behind Logos. If Pathos itself, in contrast to Logos, is something to be suffered, preceding any conceptual or determinative grasp, as singular, multiple, and contingent, irreducible to universal categories, in itself it is the chaos that receives order. In earlier works, Miki called this the dark, especially in his period when he was working on Marx. He called this the dark, yami. And here, borrowing Nishida's terminology, he also calls it the nothing, mu. He does mention this word mu a few times in this book, Logic of Imagination. The nothing, which for Nishida was the ungrounded ground for beings, you. Since nothingness as indeterminacy, as the root of unpredictability, is what allows for novelty, it is this element that makes history dynamic. Imagination creates new forms by rearranging old forms, but it's precisely this formless element, the nothingness, that permits change. Logos alone would be static. Pathos renders it loose. But it's also the case that Pathos alone would fail to create any meaningful coherence. Without Pathos, history would not be history, but be utterly static and determined, and hence predictable. The contingent and unexpected in the singularity of experience is that in the face of which we must respond. Initially with despair and sorrow, the starting point of philosophy for Nishida, or perhaps with amazement and wonder, thaumatsei, the starting point of philosophy for the ancient Greeks. I think it is in this sense that for Miki, the root of creation is this pathos in the depths of human beings, in history as an indetermination, demanding determination. Pathos is our experiencing or suffering of an undeterminable singular event or manifold of events, which Logos, in its verbal sense, then gathers together to determine it and give it form. Tanaka Kyubun, in his commentary on Miki, described this as raking together, kakiatsumeru. The history of philosophy, at least as Western metaphysics, has been a succession of such determinations under a normative nominative that attempts to erase the verbal dynamism of history, e.g. as nature or God or the subject in the history of Western metaphysics. Norms that are themselves products, in Miki's terms, forms of this dynamic process of world formation. In this way, we can understand the imagination's unification of pathos and logos, which he explains in terms of the synthesis of the emotional and the intellectual, the subjective and the objective. So as Odagiri-san said, it is pretty ambiguous how he uses pathos and logos, but so in this way we can understand the imagination's unification of pathos and logos to in fact mean the determination of the indeterminate, or what in Nishida's terms would be the formation of the formless. Borrowing Nishida's language, Miki states in his introduction that at the root of form is a form beyond form, katachi o koeta katachi, the formless form, katachi naki katachi. For the logic of imagination, whereby chaos is given order and the undetermined determined, is in itself inconceivable in terms of irreducible to what has forms, objects, or beings, including the duality of subject and object. Imagination is at the point where subject and object are unified and where their direction arises through its formation. Thus, on the basis of